What's up, everybody? Hello and welcome to Not Your Average Meta, an MTG Commander channel dedicated to bringing you decks and commanders you wouldn't normally find in your average meta. This week's video is brought to you by our new channel sponsor, International MTG. If you're looking for competitive pricing on your favorite MTG cards old and new, be sure to check out the International MTG store and TCG Player, link in the description of this video. We'd also like to give a special shout out to one of Not Your Average Meta's generous patrons, Martin Stanley, for everything he's done to help out the channel. On this week's episode of Not Your Average Meta, we're traveling into the Wilds of Eldraine so we can bring you a fun Commander Showdown. This week's matchup features Brendan making a return playing a Hylda of the Icy Crown deck he borrowed from Ryan, Patrick playing the Virtue and Valor Precon deck being led by the secondary commander, Gylwain, casting director, Foggerl playing the set's mono-red legend, Goddric, Cloaked Reveler, and Foil back again playing a Dimir Fairy deck being led by Talion, the Kindly Lord. Now that we have our fighters, let's venture out into the wilds and see which deck will come out on top. Turn 1, Patrick plays a Plains while Fog plays a Mountain and Foil plays a Tainted Isle. Brendan plays a Sea Chrome Coast while he passes his turn to Patrick, who draws and plays a Forest. Fog plays another Mountain for turn before then paying 1 and casting a Faithless Looting, which has him drawing 2 cards and then discarding 2 cards. Foil draws and then plays an Island for turn before paying 2 for an Arcane Signet. Brendan draws and plays an Island of his own before he then pays 2 for an Azorius Guildmage. Patrick plays a V2 Ghazi of the City Tree for turn before he then taps out and casts his commander Gylwain. He then has him entering play with a Royal Roll before he passes his turn to Fog, who plays a Mountain. Fog then also taps out and pays 3 to cast his commander Goddric. Fog then goes to combat, swinging his commander over at Foil for 3 commander damage. Foil plays a tapped Temple of Deceit for turn, scrying a card to the bottom of his library before passing. Brendan plays a Plains for turn before then going to combat, swinging his Guildmage over at Foil for 2 more damage. Patrick plays a Plains for turn and then pays to cast a Core Spirit Dancer, which he has interplay with a Royal Roll token. Patrick then casts a Cadence Transformation targeting Fog's commander, which has him then drawing 2 cards when it enters play. He then goes to combat, swinging his commander over at Fog, hitting him for 3 commander damage. Fog plays a Mountain for turn and then pays 2 to cast a Bespoke Battle Garb before he then pays to equip it to his commander. He then goes to combat and swings his 5/3 Elk commander over at Patrick for 5 commander damage. Foil plays a tapped Sunken Hollow for turn before he then taps out to cast his commander Talion, choosing 2 as it enters play. Brendan plays an Island for turn and then also taps out to cast his commander Hylda. He then goes to combat, but this time swings his Guildmage over at Fog for 2 damage. Patrick plays a Force for turn and then pays to target his Core Spirit Dancer with an Indomitable Might, which has him drawing a card when it enters play. He then goes to combat, swinging a Spirit Dancer over at Brendan for 8 damage. Fog draws and then plays another Mountain before he then goes straight to combat, swinging his Elk commander over Brendan for 5 commander damage. Fog then goes to his second main phase and casts a Blasphemous Act, which has him wiping the board of all the creatures in play. Foil plays a Swamp for turn and then casts a Talisman of Dominance, as well as also paying to cast a Layla, Cunning Conqueror. Brendan plays a Plains for turn and then pays 3 in order to cast a Minister of Impediments. And on his end step, Foil pays 1 to cast a Consider, which has him creating a Fairy token and looking at the top card of his library, which he decides to draw. Patrick plays a Force for turn and then taps out to cast a Liberated Livestock. Fog plays another Mountain for turn before he then pays 5 to recast his commander a second time. Foil plays a tapped Path of Ancestry for turn before paying 3 to cast a Mocking Sprite. He then mistakenly scries 1 card, keeping it on top of his library before he hits Patrick in the air with his Fairy token. Brendan plays another Plains for his turn and then taps out to recast his commander a second time. On his end step, Foil casts a Frantic Search, which has him creating another Fairy token before he then draws 2 cards and discards 2 cards and untaps 3 of his lands. Patrick plays a Force for turn and then pays 5 to cast a Winds of Wrath, which immediately gets countered by Foil with a Mana Drain. Patrick then goes to combat, but in response, Brendan taps out his creature using his Ministers. Second main, Patrick casts a Paradise Druid and passes. Fog plays another Mountain for turn before he then pays to cast a Fire Shrieker, before he then pays to cast a Goblin Instigator, which creates a 1/1 red Goblin creature token when it enters play, triggering the Celebration. He then pays to equip his commander with the Fire Shrieker and then goes to combat, which has his Battle Garb automatically equipping to his commander. He then swings his Flying Commander over at Brendan for 12 commander damage. Foil draws for turn and then uses the Mana Drain mana to help him recast his commander a second time, which has him picking 2 once again. He then casts Rankle Master of Pranks and goes to combat, swinging 2 of his creatures over at Fog while he swings the rest of his creatures over at Patrick. He then goads Patrick's livestock and Fog's commander and passes turn. Brendan plays an island for turn and then passes to Patrick, who draws for turn and then goes to combat. He then swings his livestock over at Fog, who blocks with the goblin, and second main phase he destroys his own livestock with a generous gift. This then has him creating a cat token, a bird token, and an ox token, as well as a 3/3 elephant token, before he then equips each of them with an aura card from his graveyard returning to play. He then pays to cast his commander a second time, which once again has him entering with the Royal Roll token. Fog plays a Mountain for a turn and then pays 2 to cast Mask of Immolation, which enters with a 1/1 elemental token, which once again triggers his commander's celebration ability. This then also triggers Foil's commander, which has Fog losing 2 life and Foil drawing a card. Fog then goes to combat, swinging his commander over at Patrick before he then pumps it up 2 times in order to try to take him out with commander damage. Patrick then responds by targeting his commander with the Swords to Plowshares, and in response to that, Fog cycles a card in order to draw another card. Fog's commander then gets exiled to the command zone and he gains 7 life before passing his turn to Foil. On his end step, Foil delves some cards away to cast Dig Through Time, which has him looking at the top 7 cards of his library and putting 2 of them to his hand while he creates another fairy token. Foil then untaps and draws for turn before then casting a Kindred Dominance, choosing fairies. This then has Brendan responding by casting a Gridlock in order to tap down some of Foil's permanents, which also has him paying to use his commander's ability, having him scry 2 cards and drawing a card. He then uses his ministers to tap down 1 of Foil's fairies before Fog goes and sacks his elemental to deal 1 damage to the fairy in order to kill it. The rest of the creatures then get wiped off the board before Foil goes to combat, swinging his 4 fairy tokens over at Fog for 4 damage. Brendan plays an island for turn and then he pays 6 in order to cast an Austere Command, which then gets countered by Foil with a Spell Stutter. Foil then creates another fairy token and Brendan passes turn. Patrick plays a Plains for turn and then casts Elevere of the Wild Court, the face commander of the deck. He then pays an Enchanter with the Mantle of the Ancients, which has all of his equipments and auras returning from his graveyard to his battlefield attached to his creature. On his upkeep, Patrick creates a Sapling token and Fog then draws for turn. He then pays to cast his commander a 3rd time and passes his turn to Foil, and on Foil's upkeep, Patrick creates another Sapling token. Foil then draws and casts Glenalindra Liege before going to combat, swinging his 3 available creatures over at Fog while he swings his 5 fairy tokens over at Patrick. He then goads Patrick's Elevere as well as goading Fog's commander once again. He then also triggers Rankle's ability, having each player discard a card and then draw a card and lose a life. On his end step, Brendan pays to cast a Swords to Plowshares, targeting Foil's Hylda. Foil then pays to flash in a Sign of Una, which has Brendan's spell Fizzling. Brendan plays a Command Tower for turn. He then pays to cast a Court Street Denizen as well as a Silkbind Fairy, which has him mistakenly tapping down 1 of Foil's fairies. He then triggers Foil's commander, having him lose 2 life while Foil draws a card. Patrick untaps for turn and creates another Sapling before drawing. He then pays in order to cast his commander a 3rd time, which once again has him entering play with a Royal Roll token. He then casts a Starfield Mystic, which has him losing 2 life if Foil draws a card once again, and the Starfield Mystic entering play with a Royal Roll token. He then goes to combat, swinging Elevere over at Fog, who just takes a hit and goes down to 4 life. This then has him creating another Sapling, which enters play with a Roll token before he then passes his turn to Fog and creates another Sapling on Fog's upkeep. Fog then draws for turn and then pays 2 to cast a Dragon Fodder, which creates him 2 Goblin tokens, triggering his commander's celebration ability. He then pays to equip his commander to the Fire Shrieker before making a Gentleman's Agreement with the other 2 players at the table.
I could do this. I could swing a piggy and make him destroy my commander. No one takes any damage, and then he can just kill all 3 of us at the same time.
Yes!
And then we all get last place.
May I see it? Hey! No.
So, I'll go.
I think that would be content.
Fog, then being true to his word, goes to combat, which equips his battle garb to his commander before he swings him over at Brendan, who destroys him with a generous gift. Fog then pays to cast a Mog War Marshal, which has him creating a Goblin token and losing 2 life, while Foil draws a card. Foil draws for turn, then plays a Watery Grave, which has him paying the 2 life to bring it into play untapped. He then pays to cast a Snap, making sure Brandon doesn't have any flying blockers to stop him from winning the game. He then plays a Helm of the Host before paying to equip it to his Scion of Una. Foil then goes to combat, creating a Scion token before he then swings his fairies at each of his opponents, taking them all out of the game. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe in order to see more games and decks you wouldn't normally see in your average meta.